Scribblers. I'm Katie, the founder and CEO of the Scribblers Den, your online source for writing craft courses and writing community. Today, we're here with a phenomenal Ronit J. Ronit writes fantasy that is dark and thought provoking. He has 3 books out that you can read right now. One is Help, My Dog is the Chosen One, which I absolutely love that title. Another is Abandoned by the Gods, which is a collection of 4 fantasy stories, and Island of the Dying Goddess. When Ronit's not writing, he's making independent films, traveling, playing chess, or sometimes annoying his wife. So it's so great to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm excited for this chat and thank you, Scribblers Day.
Thank you. All right, so then let's just dive right in, right? So, being an author has
Yeah.
always been a lifelong dream of yours, and your first attempt at writing an epic fantasy was at the age of 11, which congratulations, that's amazing. Can you just tell us a little bit about your writing journey since then and how you've gotten to now in 2025?
Definitely. So 11 was when I read Aragon, and I found out that Christopher Paolini was 15 when he wrote the book. So I was like, okay, if he can write it at 15, I can do it at 11. And I wrote 100 pages on my father's personal computer, and then the hard drive crashed. And that is, I think, the first ever real taste of disappointment that I had in my life.
My heart is
Um,
breaking for you.
Yeah, that was like not good. I was really disappointed. I was sad for like a few days. And
Yeah.
then a few years later, I started writing that story again. Again, it was like both these iterations of the story were essentially just rip-offs of Aragon and later on whatever else I'd read. But I wrote one chapter, I think this was in 2011 or 12 when I was a little more mature. I was 17 at the time, 17,
Mhm.
18, and that's it. And then life got in the way. That chapter was just lying on my computer until one fine day. I don't know, I think my friends were home and we just found it and we read it together, and my friends actually liked the chapter, and
Yeah.
that's what prompted me to keep writing, and that I developed into a 246,000 word epic fantasy story, which was still a ripoff of Aragon and Game of Thrones and all those classic fantasy stuff that everyone has read. It was not a good one. It was a very, I can say that now because back then I don't think I had enough, how do you put it? Like I was not self-aware enough to point out my mistakes, but it was not a very good book. Still, I tried to query it. I got hundreds of rejections for it. While querying it,
Congratulations.
thank you. I, it was quite a massive learning experience for me, querying that one, because most of them didn't even no, actually none of them gave me any feedback for why it didn't work for them.
Mm.
So I had to figure it out myself. And while I was querying, I wrote 2 more books, one which was set in the same universe. That book, when I gave it to my beta readers, every single one of my beta reader told me that the second half is unput downable, but the first half is quite a slog.
Okay.
And I had the exact same feedback for the other book I wrote, which was in 2018-19. This was a post-apocalypse, sorry, a post-apocalyptic action thriller, absurd novel called
Mhm.
Plastic Coffins. Same feedback, like the second half was great, but the first half not so great. And the feedback I got for these 2 books, when I took all of it and I went back to that original story I'd written, I figured out that okay, the first story I'd written is essentially just the first half of the book. The setups don't really pay off. The payoffs I've given aren't really set up well, and that was the same problem with all 3 of my books.
Yeah.
During this whole during this whole process, I also made my first feature film. I wrote and directed quite a few short films. I wrote
Mm.
short films that I was able to sell to different channels. And this is where like writing films is where I really learned how to tell stories. And by the time I'd figured out storytelling at its most basic is where I discovered Sanderson actually in 2018. And 2019 was when I found out that Sanderson actually wrote 400,000 words of Way of Kings. This was, I think, his seventh or ninth book that he ever wrote, and it was rejected by everyone. And years later, after learning how to tell stories better, he revisited that same manuscript,
Mhm.
rewrote the whole thing, and that is one of the most iconic epic fantasy books today.
Yeah,
So,
like everybody talks about Brandon
yeah,
Sanderson, like he's like top tier, right? Um,
yeah.
yeah.
So if he can go back and like writing a 400,000 word book is a Herculean task in itself. To
Yes.
repeat that task and improve on it, maybe put in twice as much effort to improve on it, and then make it what it is today. That to me was really inspiring, and that's where I decided I'm going to revisit that same story I had, which the idea for it came to me when I was 11 years old.
Mhm.
It was just a very basic idea, but I don't think I had the maturity to develop that idea. And in 2020, I revisited that idea and I just started brainstorming how I can tell this same story in a way that's not a ripoff of like popular IP.
Mhm.
And I wrote about 100,000 words of this in 2021. Just to, I thought I would develop that one better, but then in 2023, after publishing my first book, I realized that I have grown even more as a storyteller and a writer, and I need to retell the story with the right kind of maturity, with the right kind of
Mhm.
planning. And these characters and these ideas need some time to develop. And so I've been working on that since then.
Yeah.
And in the process, I've written three books, which you mentioned.
Yes, which is awesome. And I think I really love that you mention how like your first thing that you wrote was very derivative and just very based in like other things. Because I think that's where most of us start. I mean, that's where I started. I started writing like when I was a teenager. And it was just like completely ripped off. I'm like, oh, it's this story, but I'm going to change the character's name. Um, because we start with that because it's almost like we have to model what we know and like before we can find our own voices. So I really love that, and I love that like you're going back to it and putting in everything that you've learned into that story now so that you can make it your own. Like that's just super cool. I love that.
Thank you. It's like what Tarantino says, steal from everyone, but make it your own, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, because there's only so many story ideas out in the world. So you can be original, but there's always going to be some aspect of it. Like, yes, we've done this story before, but you're the one, like it's your voice that really comes through in your lived
yeah.
experience. So yeah. Okay, so I really love reading different books that have strong themes in it. And they make me think, and I find myself engaging with that book even when I'm not necessarily reading it. Your books all feature very strong themes. So, how do you personally develop those themes and bring them to life on the page? Does the theme kind of lead the way when you write, or do you find it along the way?
So for me, it's the theme that is the beginning of it all, and that's the process that works best for me. I figured out
Mm-hmm.
because see, when we read, everyone has a different way of reading books. Some people read for escape, some people read for entertainment, others read to engage with ideas. And writing is exactly like that. Some people write to cope with something, some people write to verbalize their thoughts, some people maybe some people write just because that's the one thing that gives them joy. I am the latter two things. That's me. Like I need like there's too much chaos in my mind. I need to verbalize it in a way.
Yes.
And that's one of the first things that I think I learned in therapy, where my therapist told me to keep journaling,
Mm-hmm.
but journaling never worked for me until this one time where I think I wrote a short story to figure out what was happening in my mind, the ideas that like whatever thoughts I had, I tried to make a narrative out of those thoughts to try and make sense of them, and that process really worked. So then when the time came for me to write my debut novel, which is Help My Dog Is the Chosen
Mm-hmm.
One, I wanted it to be a fun adventure with a dog being the chosen one, the savior of mankind, and include all kinds of pop culture references and everything. But there has to be a coherent narrative, and I figured that if I'm telling something, why not add an extra layer of meaning? And uh, I decided to use themes of mental health because by this point, when I wrote the book, I had made quite a lot of progress in my mental health journey. I had been doing therapy for years. I'd figured out ways to manage my anxiety better.
Mhm.
So I thought, why not? Because I know what anxiety feels like. Why not bring conflict through anxiety, but also bring humor through it? Because when I'm telling stories of how I was feeling anxious at any particular event, I always try and bring comedy into it. Because who wants to hear a sob story when you can tell the exact same story with jokes, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
So that's how I tell stories to my friends, and that's how I told this story as well, with that extra layer of mental health and healing. And that's, if you go back and see the entire story of Help My Dog,
Mhm.
that's how it starts with the conflict, and then the resolution has a lot of themes of healing. Like the way the resolution takes place is like it's an abstract way of healing, and that made it very easy for me to write the story. I wrote it in a month. I wrote it for NaNoWriMo. This was before the Nano
Yeah.
scandal. And yeah, I wrote it in a month. And because the theme was so clear, it was able, like, I figured out that when I know what the idea is, and so what is themes? Basically, it's the central unifying idea, right?
Hmm.
What the whole work is trying to say, you can condense it into a single sentence or a single word. So when I knew that mental health is a theme for Help My Dog, I was it helped me choose what actions my characters are going to perform. If they have to take a choice, it will always be in favor of what works best for the theme. And that led to a very coherent narrative, and well, that ended up being my debut novel. I was actually happy with what it ended up being, and feedback has been great. Everyone who I've spoken to has loved it. There
Hmm.
are problems with the book, no doubt. It's not a perfect book, but it served its purpose in being my debut novel. So,
Yeah. I love the concept of it, like just the concept and like the fact that it's filled with pop culture references. That's the kind of stuff that I love. And I would love to see it be like a film. I want to see this be like I want to see it played out for me in like live action.
oh
That would
yeah,
be amazing.
absolutely. I mean, so the idea for this book actually came to me when I was walking my dog.
Hmm.
We were entering my building after the walk, and there was a cat nearby. And uh, my dog Joy, she loves chasing cats. So naturally, she ran after the cat. But if you know anything about street cats, is that they can hold their own against
Oh yeah.
even like tigers. So the moment Joy came close to this dog, to this cat, she just like raised its hackles and hissed at Joy. And now this is nighttime. I don't know if it was some illusion of light or what, but I saw a light flash in the cat's eye.
Yeah.
And in that very moment, Joy starts wailing, and she runs away. Like, she never runs away from cats, but this one time she actually ran away from the cat. And that image stayed with me. I came back home. I told my wife the entire story, like it's a joke. It was something funny and cute that happened. But that visual stayed in my mind, and then that led to, okay, what if the cat was a dark lord and the was trying to attack the dog, and it just developed into what it is now.
Yeah, like it's beautiful and it just everything about that is it's so perfect. So Scribblers, make sure you check that book out. Like read all of them, but that one's just it's just so cool and it's so off the
Oh yeah.
beaten path. Yeah. Um,
Oh, I think it's blurred.
yeah, it's a little
All
bit
right.
blurred. There
There
it
we
is,
go.
right there. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes. Like it just it's such a great concept. I really love it. Um, So when we're talking about different themes, one of the themes that is in Island of the Dying Gods is body horror, which I'm a horror baby. Like I'm a huge wimp, but I love body horror, and I don't know why. So I would just like to love to hear why you think it's so popular for readers because readers love it. Like we eat that stuff up. We're like, oh, it's body horror. Like let me get to that. It's so good. So why do you think that we crave these moments in books?
I think this falls under the same spectrum of why people love true crime or serial killer stories. It has something to do with something very innately human. Like, how do I put it? We are all attracted to something that not necessarily normal, right? Like, some may call it fetishes. In other sense of the word, it's an inclination to find out what the extremes of the human condition could be. Like when
That's
you
a
see a
beautiful way
train
to
wreck,
put it. Yeah.
or a car crash, like when you see any of these things, you know that seeing it is going to make you feel something negative.
Mhm.
Like just just 2 weeks back, there was like you must have heard of the plane crash in my country. uh, I mean, I woke up from my nap and that's the first video I watched, and it did bother me for the next 2 3 days because I'm going to be flying out of the country later in the year, and knowing that something like this has happened kind of hits very close to home.
Yeah.
Uh, but then you can't help but keep watching these videos, right? Because maybe it caters to something in the brain. I don't know what it is, but the brain craves it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I am not able to make sense of why it is, but it works that way.
Yeah. And
And
it
like the
is. It's that
yeah,
sense of like allowing ourselves to be scared, but also knowing that we're perfectly safe, like in our homes or wherever it is, like we're watching a film or reading a book, we're like, okay, this is terrifying, but I'm on my couch with
yeah,
my dog next to me and a cup of tea and everything's fine. So it's like that we can play with those things
yeah,
that are a little bit taboo almost or a little bit uncomfortable.
yeah. And so the body horror in my book, for me it was about, it had a very different connotation. But there's a
Mhm.
reviewer, his name is Michael Delaney. He also goes by Wolfman Dula. He actually analyzed the body horror in a way that completely blew my mind, because I didn't realize that I'd done this subconsciously. Like, so again, this is about themes, and the theme behind Island of the Dying Goddess is grief and loss, and the story behind it is not a happy one. Like, I ended up writing this one mostly to cope with my father's stroke.
Mhm.
He had a stroke in 23, and I wrote this book in November 23. I started writing this in November 23, and it was a very random idea. But then, because I discovery wrote it, everything that was happening around me just made its way into the story.
Yeah.
And over the edits, I did figure out how, like, figure out why I was feeling the grief I was feeling, the sense of loss that I was feeling. Because I mean, my father is alive and well right now, but the stroke has left him impaired. His cognitive functions are impaired. So he's not really the exact same person he was before the stroke. So there is this deep sense of loss that I feel in
Mhm.
this whole scenario. And it was not a very good time. But because I was writing the story, I was able to channel all those thoughts, all that emotional turmoil into the prose, into the characters, and in giving these characters their choices and how it played out,
Yeah.
it helped me cope with what I was going through. So body horror in that moment for me was about this. So the character's name is Gav, and he patches on other people's hands onto his body to the point that he's essentially become a pile of hands. That's what this god is. He's one of the primary antagonists.
That's
Uh, the
fascinating.
character the character is inspired by this demigod from Elden Ring called Godric the Grafted, who is also, he's the runt of the family. So to increase his power, he kills any Tarnished who comes to steal his rune. He kills those Tarnished, and he grafts their hands onto his body. So the template for this character came from Elden Ring, but then the reasoning for him attaching those limbs was very different. Like, it's on the same lines, but then the connotation of it changes as you figure out what the story is and why he is doing what he is doing. Because for me, it symbolized brute force and anger. Like, one of the ways to deal with grief is anger. Like, the 5 stages of grief, it starts with anger. So him getting all this balled up rage, he needs to exert it by displaying his strength, and he attaches his limbs as a way of seeming intimidating. These were my thoughts. uh, Coming back to what Michael Delaney said, uh, and this really blew my mind. I was very happy that, okay, it works in more ways than what I thought of.
Mhm.
Uh, so one of the results of one of the consequences of a stroke is you can be left paralyzed, and my father is paralyzed on his right side, which is the dominant side. So in attaching these limbs, there is that connotation of uh, weakness, which is compensated for. I don't remember now. I can't remember the exact words that he used,
Hmm.
but just the idea that even in this body horror, I'm able to, like, my mind subconsciously attach that connotation of stroke and how that could play out in an extreme manner. So
Yeah,
when you t- when you talk about body horror, that could be one way of looking at it, that maybe body horror is a reflection of some kind of longing that someone has, not desire in the sense, but something that's missing from their life, and it's
yeah.
in a twisted sense mirrored in this body horror that you see.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I really also love that idea of like you kind of go in with your intention of the theme and what it means to you, but the reader's always going to get something else. And sometimes it's going to align with what your vision of that theme was, and sometimes it's not, and it's deeper. So I really like, like that you brought that up, because I think that's something that we as authors sometimes don't think about. We just think about, I'm going to write this book about X. And then we send it out and that's not what people get from it, and we're like, oh, you didn't do it right, like, did you not read the book I wrote? But once it's out of our hands, there's nothing we can do. So
Yeah, it's not our book anymore. It's
yeah,
the reader's book now.
yeah, exactly. That's like everything like about that process is really just fascinating, like hearing how your inspiration came and how you worked all that in, um and just like really cool. um All right, so we've already talked a little bit about some of your inspiration for writing, and obviously Brandon Sanderson is like right up there at the top. What other authors have you really kind of studied in regards to your writing craft? And then how do you integrate that? Like, I love I love how you talked about like how like you had to do the work yourself, which I think is so important for writers, is to like look at what we've done, how it can be improved. But how did you integrate reading these books into your own writing craft knowledge?
Okay, so first of all, I did not study any author. But what I did was, when I was reading any particular book, I knew what I wanted to pull out of that book.
Mm,
Like, for example, I knew that Joe Abercrombie is really good with characters. And I read the First Law series specifically to figure out what
mhm.
about his characters is works. And I mean, I just ended up binging on the entire series because it was just, I mean, it's so good. But just figuring out what works in a particular scene, what works in a particular chapter. If there's one character who everyone loves, like everyone loves Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive, why is it that everyone loves him? Is it his
Mhm.
relentless attitude, his never give up attitude that everyone finds inspiring? Is it the fact that he helps everyone around himself and they feel this warm sense of belonging and security when they read his chapters? It could be multiple reasons.
Mhm.
So, how can you present, or how can you create that same sense of security, that same sense of warmth, that same sense of inspiration through your own characters? So, I didn't study, again, I'm saying
Yeah.
I just tried to figure out, and if it's worked, can I imitate something like that? Not the exact same character template, but the feeling that this character brings out in the reader.
Yeah, I get that same kind of
That's
that same
one.
reaction from the reader. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And from there, it comes to my second point, which is you can't limit yourself to books, because of course there are many, like Terry Pratchett is right up there for me when it comes to
Yeah.
writing. Like, I mean, one of my, yeah, everyone talks about that one paragraph that he wrote about the shoes and economic disparity, and it's
Yes.
one of the finest paragraphs you can read in fantasy. But Terry Pratchett has so many nuggets of gold throughout his work. I
Hmm.
mean, just off the top of my head, I remember one. There was one. I think it was Mort. I don't remember which book it was. It's one of the earlier books in the Discworld series. He needs to tell the passage of time. 1 month passed by. But how do you present? Like, he inserts a joke even there. Like, 1 month
Yeah.
passed by, it didn't feel like hanging around. Like, I mean, 1 month passed by, it didn't feel like sticking around. And it's now I'm analyzing it, so it might not sound that funny, but even in just two lines, he's left that one nugget of humor for you to just chuckle or appreciate, and that adds character to his prose. That adds that
Yes.
builds on the vibe of Discord. So can I do something like that? Now, humor doesn't really work in all my books the same way. Like Help My Dog has a different kind of humor,
Yeah.
but Abandoned by the Gods has almost no humor. And uh, Island of the Dying Goddess has humor that is sometimes crass, sometimes a little too provocative, sometimes just banter. It depends on what the scene demands, and it needs to be appropriate. Like Joe Abercrombie is very funny, but there's a reason he's funny because he's not always funny. When he needs to
Right.
be serious, he knows how to be serious, and
Yeah,
finding that
you have to
right
know how to
balance. So
balance it and when to have that humor and when it's going to work versus when it's not going to
yeah,
land. Yeah.
exactly. So am I frozen? Sorry,
No, you are not. You're not on my end. You're
am
good.
I frozen?
Nope,
Okay,
you're good.
okay. Sorry, you were frozen for a bit. So
Yeah, it's very
uh,
possible.
yeah. So okay, I know my thoughts are a little sporadic and all over the place right now, but that's kind of how I have consumed these books. So I'm just trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like uh, every author has taught me something different. Every book has taught me something different. And like I said, you can't just limit yourself to books because there's so much of content out there. Like video games have fantastic storytelling.
Yes.
Like just the item descriptions in Elden Ring tell a whole story. Like if you
Hmm.
just read the item descriptions in Elden Ring, they will tell you one whole part of the lore, and that's one way of storytelling. Um, Cinema is because I'm a filmmaker and I watch a lot of world cinema. Like I have I spent a lot of my formative years watching a lot of foreign language films, like Iranian films, Japanese,
Hmm.
Korean. So, uh, like not all of them follow the same kind of narrative, but then not all of them are telling the same stories either. Like they might, in the most basic sense, yes, they might be love stories or revenge stories or whatever, but the way they treat the stories is very different from the way that mainstream American movies or mainstream Indian movies do.
Yes.
And having consumed this wide like smorgasbord of culture across the world, I just I've picked up different things from different authors, different things from different filmmakers, and that I think has resulted in this motley theme, absurdism, cultural absurdism,
Hmm.
uh, whatever I've created with all of my books. Like it has a mix of like I try to bring absurdism into all of my books. I try to bring themes into all of my books because these are things that like the themes help me find direction, and the absurdism helps me like elevate that fantasy and the magic system within the realm of what I've created. So yeah.
Yeah. No, and I love that idea of like looking beyond books. I love films. I love watching different TV shows. And there's always aspects where I'm like, oh, like the pacing in this is so good. So I will rewatch that to see how they do that. Or like
Yeah.
I have a TV show that I love. There's 5 seasons. And I've gone back and I rewatch it like 3 times a year because it's my comfort show. But now I'm picking up, I'm like, oh my God, they introduced that in the second episode. And it doesn't play out until like the fourth season. And like all those little like placement things that really help when you're writing a book to make sure you're getting and you're laying the groundwork for what you need to do and having those strong themes. So yeah, definitely you got to look everywhere. So a little bit of a follow up, but if you
Okay.
were to give the all of our watchers out there the what's a book that you think that they should read and what will they learn from it?
Okay. I've thought a lot about this one,
Yeah.
and well, the answer actually should be Malazan, but I'm gonna say One Piece. Uh,
Okay.
it's not a book; it's a manga series that's
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
ongoing. It's on its 100 and 1153rd chapter right now. I think
Oh my
that's the
gosh.
number that's gonna come out this week. Yeah, and I think One Piece is one of the finest examples of storytelling in the ongoing storytelling in in modern times. It's epic.
Hmm.
It uh, it does a great job of developing character. It will introduce one character who might seem like the most random side character, and then out of nowhere you'll get this one flashback which builds this character's backstory in a way that you just like it'll twist your heart and make you fall in love with the character. It'll
Yeah.
show you this
Okay.
villain, and then it'll show you why this villain became what he is today or what she is today. Like w- and it's not linear storytelling. There is a bit of a formula to One Piece, but then
Mhm.
when you look past that formula, you see uh, so much of effort that the author, Eiichiro Oda, who's the mangaka, he draws as well.
Yeah.
uh, the amount of effort he's put in, the amount of care and love he's given to each character, and not just the protagonist, but even the villains, even the side characters, even these random drawings. Like it's this massive panel, you will have the main cast, but then even when you look at the individuals in the background, you'll see there is character there as well. There is it's just such a beautiful story, not just from a visual perspective, but from a narrative sense as well. And it continues to be exciting, it continues to be
Mhm.
captivating. uh, Over 1,000 chapters, and it's still going strong. It's still one of the best-selling mangas out there, and there is a reason for that. Like 1,000 chapters is intimidating, but people are still picking up
They are.
the
Yeah. No,
first
I
volume
have
today.
my students talk about
And
that every now and then. I have ninth
yeah,
graders and they'll just like they'll bring that up and I'm like, I haven't read it, but I know what you're talking about. So I'm gonna have to add
it's
it to my pile now.
it's definitely one of the best. The first couple of arcs aren't really the strongest because that's where I think even Oda was figuring out
Hmm.
his style. But as it grows, it's blossomed into something much larger. It's blossomed into a Malazan level epic fantasy full
Yeah.
of absurdism and themes that are very relevant to today. Like
Good.
themes from
Yeah.
anti-war to anti-slavery to so many things that are very like I mean, the main villain is the world government. So
Yeah.
I
So very
don't know what that is supposed to
extremely,
mean. So
extremely relevant. Yes, everything. Like, can we stop media? Can we just like stop having relevant things come up?
yes,
Because I just want to read stories that are fun.
yes. Fake news is a not a major, but fake news
Yeah.
is quite a big element in One Piece. So
Oh, yeah. So, so viewers, if you're looking for escapism, maybe not the thing, but also totally check it out because it's going to teach you a lot. Yeah. All right. So if we could just shift a little bit into your publishing journey, how did you approach self-publishing your novels? And you've already mentioned that you sent some queries out with that original fantasy, but did you send any queries out for like help? My dog is the chosen one, or did you just decide self-publishing all the way?
okay, so like I said, the first one that I wrote, which was the third iteration of that story, I sent out maybe like 100 or 200 queries. I
Hmm.
was I think I was 16 at the time or 18. No, sorry, I was 20 at the time. And 200 queries, uh, maybe like 20 of them or 50 of them responded, and all of them were rejections. Uh, what I figured out at that time was, first of all, many of them don't accept unsolicited manuscripts.
Hmm.
So you have to go through an agent, and whether it's an agent or a publisher, the selection process is more or less the same, where you submit an X amount of pages or X amount of words from your manuscript. You wait for 3 months or 6 months. Sometimes it's even a year. And in many of these cases, they don't even guarantee that you'll hear back from them. So just
Right.
if you've not heard from us in 6 months, assume it's. And I was turning 20. I was 29 at the time when before I started writing Help My Dog. Um, I wanted to be published before I was 30. So I I said, okay, I know I'm going to self-publish. The only thing stopping me before was I hadn't seen enough self-published books. The ones I had seen were
Hmm.
not very good examples. So I was a bit hesitant about what kind of books are self-published, because there were back then there was this perception that only people who fail to get traditionally published will
Right.
opt for self-publishing.
Yeah, and that's
But
so not
then,
true.
yeah, I've read so many books that are much better than some traditionally published books. Like, uh, like my introduction to self-publishing was Rob J. Hayes. I read Never
Hmm.
Die, and while the book had its issues, it was just a very fun book to read. From there, I started reading more. I just read more of Rob J. Hayes' work, and each one was just better than the other. Then I got into Will White, and then it just opened up floodgates of different indie authors. There's Baptiste Pinsonwu. There's Callum Lott, who published his first book last year, and he's re-releasing A Dirge for Casquias in this year.
Hmm.
There's Michael Michel, who has, I think, one of the most unique voices in fantasy. And I mean fantasy, not just indie fantasy. Like
Yeah.
like every single one of his books just has this very unique voice, like authorial voice. And I mean, you have such great books being self-published.
Yes.
Maybe I can give a stab at it. And I went in when I was writing Help My Dog is the Chosen One. I knew this was going to be self-published. I knew I wanted to attempt self-publishing, even if it means I only get 20 sales in my lifetime. It's fine. At least I tried.
Yeah, you still did it.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I still did it. I wrote it in April. After that, I spent the next couple of months first self-editing, then alpha reading. No, sorry, no. Then I got a bunch of beta readers to
Hmm.
give me feedback, and these were relationships I developed. They are friends, all of them, but many of them had read my books before. Many of them I have read their screenplays before. So there was that comfort that, okay, I know I can share something with you because I know you will give me honest feedback. I know
Yeah.
if something's bad, you'll call it out. You won't just say, okay, it works, it doesn't work. You will call it out for what it is. And
And that's so
every single one
important.
who gave
Yeah.
me feedback, yeah, I mean, I got specific feedback for, okay, this particular scene does not work because it's too long. You need to remove these two pages. This character is just very annoying, whatever it is. But I got very clear feedback. So by
Hmm.
the time I got the editor on board, I had already fixed the book to quite a great extent. And the editing was mostly line and copy. It wasn't
Okay.
developmental because in terms of plot, I was 100% sure what I wanted out of this book. I I changed the ending twice. I changed the climax twice. The ending was the same, but the climax I did change twice because I realized
Hmm.
that the original climax was focusing on my MC's girlfriend, and it was going away from the mental, like it took away from his emotional catharsis. So
Yeah.
then I rewrote that part to make the catharsis his because it was important to tie up every loose end. And yeah, once I was confident about the story, that's when I got the editor on board. That's where I got the cover artist on board, who is also a friend of mine.
Hmm.
And yeah, like I mean, it was a lot of trial and error. I made a whole lot of mistakes when publishing Help My Dog Is the Chosen One. I made fewer mistakes when publishing Abandoned by the Gods, and I've made even fewer mistakes. I will still say I've made some mistakes, but I am learning, and every new book that I've self-published has been easier than the previous one.
Hmm.
Much lesser anxiety than the first one. Much more confidence in terms of reaching out to people, and more importantly, much more confidence in myself that I have grown with each of these books as an author and as a publisher. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's a constant learning journey. You keep talking to people, you keep figuring out what's working, what's not working, and yeah, here we are.
No, that's amazing. So you like we've already kind of segued into my next question for you, which is your three books into that self-publishing process. If you could talk to the Ronit of 2023, with all the knowledge that you have right now, what specific advice would you give yourself as you start that process of publishing Help My Dog Is the Chosen One?
That's a very simple one. It doesn't matter 2023 Ronit, 2024 Ronit
Mhm.
from yesterday also. I will give the exact same advice, which is that do not hesitate.
Okay.
Just don't hesitate. That's it. Because when I was publishing my debut, I had a lot of anxiety in terms of will people like this or not, despite like I having 10 examples of who loved the book and gave me specific reasons for why they loved the book. And those were reasons that I wanted people to like the book for.
Hmm.
So like I achieved my goal of evoking certain emotions in people. I got the right kind of reactions for the climax and the scenes. So that's indication that I have done something right. And I was self-aware enough to admit to myself that this is not the best book out there, but it's good enough to be my debut novel.
Hmm.
And despite that, when I started outreach for ARCs, I was very hesitant about reaching out to YouTubers and content creators for interviews because I kept feeling this sense of self-doubt and
Yeah.
just feeling like I'm not worth being called for an interview for this book. I don't think
You
it's that
are,
good.
you are worth it.
Yeah, yeah, I would like to shout that to myself from 2023. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, nobody knows you. So if you don't talk about your book, no one else is going to talk about your
Yeah.
book. So you have to start somewhere. So don't hesitate. Just don't hesitate.
That is such great advice. I think for so many aspects of the writing process, don't hesitate to start that book. Don't hesitate to finish it. Don't hesitate to talk to people about it. Just um, you can apply it to every single piece, and I think a lot of us need to hear that more. I know I do. So, all right. So your next project is a trilogy. So, of course, a
Mm.
trilogy isn't just creating three stories with the same characters. You have to build on each one. There's a clear character arc from book one to book three. So, can you tell us a little bit about what your process looks like for outlining and preparing for writing a trilogy?
Okay, so I feel like I'm cheating on this one because this is the same book that I wrote in 2000 when I was 11 years old, the same book that I rewrote in 2011, and the same story I've been trying to write in 2000 since I was 11. It's been
Okay.
I'm 31 now, so it's been 20 years. It's two full decades. The story is not the same, is what I will start with saying. Because at this point, I figured out that it's the themes that work for me. It's the idea that matters because that
Mhm.
helps me plot my books better. It helps me develop characters. It helps me figure out character choices, which then just it ties everything together for me. So when I was when I first had the idea, and I think this is the first time I'm ever putting it out there publicly. But when I was 11, the idea I had for that book was I wanted to write an epic fantasy series that tells the rise and fall of a civilization.
Okay.
And I don't think I understood what civilization was at the age of 11. I think I was just studying civilizations in history, and I used to like history. I used to love watching the History Channel and reading up about different uh, eras from ancient history, medieval history. So I just wanted to tell a story about the rise and fall of a civilization. But for an 11-year-old to even think of this without really understanding it, it
Right.
makes complete sense why that book didn't go anywhere. Even at 19, when I finished writing the third iteration, which was 246,000 words long, I was mature, I was an adult, but not mature enough.
Yeah.
So again, it still ended up being an imitation of things that I admire. Now, in the last decade, I've grown not just as an adult, but emotionally.
Mhm.
Even from like my perspective has expanded in multiple ways because in these last 10 years, I've held multiple jobs. I've helmed projects. I have made my films. I've published my books. I've gotten married. I have a dog who, well, we are the primary caregiver. So I
Mhm.
mean, to have another life depend on you, that changes your perspective, that expands your perspective. And I think more importantly, I'm much more aware about the world than I was back then.
Yes.
From a
That global
political
awareness.
standpoint,
Yeah.
yeah, from politics to culture to sociology, in multiple layers. And also, all this has changed my perception of what it means for the rise and fall of a civilization. So I don't think the book is it's still in by stretch of the definition, it's still the trilogy will be about the rise and fall of a civilization, but it's much more than that.
Mhm.
And to make things more relevant, I have looked at world politics in the last couple of years, and the rise of right wing, why that is happening, all kinds of wars that are being fought right now. Like when wars get started, when ceasefires are declared, like figuring out what has led to mass support of these kind of
Hmm.
incidents and implementing that into my story. So it's still rise and fall of the civilization, but yeah, it's not really the same. It's I don't want to reveal the the theme yet
Yeah, that's
because I'm
okay.
still developing. But yeah, it's that. So building off the rise and fall of a civilization, I have plotted the first book twice already because, like
Hmm.
I mentioned, I started writing it in 2021. I wrote about 100,000 words, and I'm rewriting those portions again. Um, I'm at I forgot. I think it's 125,000 words right now, and the story is much more coherent this time around. I understand the characters much better this time. I know their motivations better, and all of them tie into the theme that I'm trying to explore with all three books. Of course,
Hmm.
each book will be different, but then each book will have its own theme, and the trilogy will have its own theme.
Yeah.
Uh, and I know how the whole thing ends. Like this is a massive story spanning thousands of years, but that's that's easier said than done, right? So I've
Oh, yeah.
figured out how to tell this massive story in different chapters in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming, that doesn't feel like I'm biting more than I can chew. And I figured that out for the first book. I'm still figuring out the outline for the second and the third. But I know like the end point of this entire trilogy because I know what the theme is. I know what and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So having that clarity makes it easier for me to make certain choices in the outline today and in the outline for the other two books when I get to it at the end of this. So the
Yeah.
process is going to be finish writing the rough draft of book one, then outline books two and three together, and then once I have the entire outline ready, then start making changes in book one and then go through the whole process
Mhm.
for book one.
No, that sounds really smart because that way you can make sure everything is going to line up, and you don't have any
Yeah.
of that regret. Well, like, well, book one is published and now this is what I have to live with. So,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
one thing I'm genuinely worried about, but I think I've grown enough as an author to be able to pull that off. I just need to put in the hours for it.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you on your website it says that you're about 50% done with the first book. How much longer do we have to wait before we get to read it?
Oh, the earliest I can imagine is end of next year, but
Okay.
more realistically, I think the first half of 2027.
Okay.
I wanted it to come out earlier, but I know it's going to take a little longer, and I'd
Mhm.
rather put in the time and do it right than
Yeah.
rush through it and regret later.
No, and that's smart though to make sure that you're satisfied with it, that you're doing what it is that you want to do rather than rush and give something that you're not going to be happy with.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm excited to see it come out. So definitely just as a note, this is like recorded in the video for posterity. When it comes out, please reach out to me again and we'll do another interview and we'll talk about the whole process of getting this trilogy sorted. Because I want to hear all about like I have really enjoyed just listening to your processes, how you logically think through things, and just everything about this. Like this is I've enjoyed all the interviews I've done, but so far, like this one, I feel has been like the most cognitive. Like you're like, oh, like you get really deep really fast, and I love it.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna leave that deepness though, and we're gonna go into the lightning round questions, which require no
Okay.
deep thought.
Okay.
So, question one: what is the coolest place that you have ever traveled to?
Hoi An in Vietnam, ancient town.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
It was I just love the chill vibes of that place. There is also Mission Sanctuary around Hoi An,
Mm-hmm.
but Ancient Town is this place that just comes alive in the night. Like throughout the day, it's just a regular marketplace, but at night, it's this beautiful. I like the first of all, it was the most Insta-worthy place that we visited during the trip, but just the vibe of it. Like we were strolling around for 3 hours. We were on our feet. We did not sit down because there was
Mm,
just so much to see. It's by the river. You can have food, you can have beer, you can have coffee, you can do
sounds
street
magical.
shopping. And yeah, it was magical. That's the right word. Like it just looks magical. It feels magical. And I mean, I've visited some really memorable places, but that's one place that I still dream of sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah, so I've only been out of the country, out of America once in my life, and I'm hoping I get to go out more in the future. But having been in other countries, like I love this whole idea of like markets, and you can go into a town square and there's people selling things, and that doesn't happen here. And I wish it did because it's such a cool concept. So that sounds amazing, some place that I'm going to be adding to my list of future potential travels. Um, okay, so question number two. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Okay, I know for sure what I want, and that is to be able to speak, read, and write every single language out there.
Yes.
Uh, so that way, when I'm reading, I don't need to read a translated version of Dostoevsky. I can read it in Russian. I don't need to watch Kurosawa movies with subtitles. I can just understand every and not miss any nuance, not miss
Yep.
anything that gets lost in translation. And I think the more languages you know, it just opens up whole new worlds and whole new cultures, which pave the way for you to expand your mind and your worldview all the more. Like
Yeah.
I learned French later in my life. Like I learned French between 2016 to 18, and I learned to like C1 level, so I can speak French properly. And just knowing that one new language, when I started watching movies, I had a very different perspective of the same movies that I watched with subtitles. I'm trying to learn Japanese right now. I'm starting with Duolingo, but I do plan on joining classes at some
Yeah.
point, and then maybe I can start reading One Piece in in the original language.
Yeah, because you're right.
So
There's
languages.
so much that's lost in translation, like those nuances, and sometimes it's like just a cultural thing. And it is rough. It always makes me sad because I'm like, I don't get it, and I wish that whoever translated this had done better, or that I actually knew that language. So yeah, that excellent pick. Excellent pick. All right, question number three. If you could live in any location from a book, where would you live and why?
Okay, this is a difficult one, honestly. Because I want to pick Discworld, but I don't want to pick Ankh-Morpork because of how shady that whole Twin City is. But I think anywhere in Discworld except Ankh-Morpork. That would be my
That would be fair. I think
answer.
that's important to take in how safe you would be in that location. Like, because there's some beautiful locations in
Yeah.
books, but you're like, no, everybody dies there. I'm not doing it. I always say that I would want to live in Rohan from Lord of the Rings because, like, I love horses and there's just like big grassy fields. But I'm like, they're kind of at war. Like, that, I don't think I'd make it. I think orcs would kill me. So maybe not.
Yeah, that's why I didn't pick Middle Earth.
Yeah. Like, you got to be smart when you think about this.
Or maybe like post after Sauron's defeated, then maybe Rohan there.
Yeah, I think I could. Yeah, like afterwards, as long as I go after after the ring has been returned. All right, your fourth question. What is your go-to snack when you go to the movie theater? What do you absolutely have to have?
Okay, this is not popcorn. This is samosas. Uh, it's very typical in India, and especially growing up, like when I used to go to the single screen theaters, they would serve popcorn and they would serve samosas. Those were the two options you had, and I would always pick samosas because I don't know if they were fresh or not, but they would be very hot. Do you know what samosas are?
Yeah, they're one of my favorite foods in the world, and I wish that I had more
Exactly.
places around me that sold them. I'm in like rural country land, and there is nothing unless I buy it frozen from the store.
So
Yeah.
the magic of that packaged
Yes.
potato with its spiciness and like the crispy outer layer. Like yeah, I like movie without samosas is just incomplete.
No,
Unless
that's
I'm watching it on my laptop, then
yeah. Yeah, no, please, please, American movie theaters, please start serving samosas because we need those. I'm requesting it. That'd be amazing. Yeah, no, excellent, excellent choice. So that's all the questions that I have for you. Scribblers, you can find links to all of Ronit's web pages below. Check it out, order his books, or go find him on social media. Ronit, thank you so much for joining the Scribblers Den for an interview. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I was honestly nervous before, but I think this was the most fun interview I've done
Okay,
till now.
thank
So
you.
would
That
love to
makes me happy.
love to come again. Would love to come again,
Yeah,
honestly.
so I'm gonna like make a note somewhere and be like, all right, when Adeva, what's it called?
Adeva.
Adeva, when
Adeva,
that comes out, we are chatting again. It's gonna
of
happen.
course.
Yeah, definitely. So all right, so scribblers, you know the drill. I need you to hit that like button. I need you to subscribe. Happy writing, and we'll see you next time. Bye.